no regular thing. I came for the ring, you know what I mean. I shoot my shot and it's clean. This for my city, yeah, this for my team.
Welcome to another episode of Blue Heaven TV. I'm Andrew, your in-studio host, and today we've got Javen in the studio. Brandon, welcome, man. I know you're remote today. Thanks for jumping on. And we have a special guest with us, Marin Angus Holmes. Thank you for joining us and hanging out with us today. Marin, how you doing?
I am so good and I'm so excited to be here. So thanks for reaching out and having me on.
Absolutely. Now, so everybody knows I'm just a knucklehead. Javen's knucklehead number two. Brandon's kind of the brains of the operation. We had to bring somebody who has some journalistic credibility. Marin, kind of tell us your background. How did you get started? What are you doing these days? And kind of introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, it's a unique story because I tell people, not everyone knows what they want to do when they're 8 years old, and not everyone says they want to cover the Dodgers when they're 8 years old. But I mean, oh, everyone says that? Okay. Does everyone say that? But I also grew up in Tennessee, and people there would rather cover the Braves. So, but there I was, and I knew I wanted to cover baseball. I knew that the Dodgers were a huge part of my life then, and that they were going to be my future at some point. And now I am covering the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation and Dodgers on SI, and it's incredible. I know I'm not in LA, but I feel so lucky.
That's awesome. And I mean, to find your passion to lock in like that, that's amazing. How long have you been writing for all those different outlets? What year are you going in?
Oh man. I like to say I got my start at least in baseball when I was 16, and that would give away my age. So let's just roughly call it 15 years of
At that point, you don't have to hide your age. Once you're my age, then you got to start doing the math backwards.
I went to the winter meetings when I was 16. They were in Nashville. And that was kind of where I got my start, got my foot in the door. I got school business for it. My principal was like, yeah, go have fun. Don't worry about coming to school. It's fine. And he talked to all my teachers, and we got that taken care of. And I went and I met everyone. And kind of what led me into the professional sports world. It was after that I got a gig covering the Nashville Predators in the NHL, and it kind of just kept going from there. I've written for so many publications. A lot of it's been freelance, but I don't take any of it for granted. I worked for the Tennessean. I contributed to ESPNW, MLB.com, NHL.com, USA Today. It's a lot, but I feel like I've found my spot right now.
Hey, finding your spot covering one of the greatest franchises in all of sports, you can't be mad about that, right?
No, not at all.
That's awesome. Well, again, Marin, thanks so much for hanging out with us. While we have you, obviously, you've been covering the Dodgers. You've been covering some of the spring training stuff. Javen and I were talking, even Brandon, and you even kind of, I think you actually had an article that just came out talking about some of the roster spots. We all kind of, are looking at the roster filling up, right? Mm-hmm. Wondering who's going to get kind of some of those last spots. What are you seeing kind of happening, especially with that outfield core and the fact that there's so many things happening?
Yeah. As of yesterday, I felt like there was one spot up for grabs, and I thought Eddie Rosario was kind of leading the race after the first 3 spring training games between it was him, Chris Taylor, Andy Pajes, and James Outman. But as of this morning, things have kind of changed a little bit because now it looks like Ha-Seong Kim may end up starting in the minor leagues. So if he starts in AAA, then that gives you 2 spots. I still think Rosario has a good shot. I like what I've seen so far. But then everyone's favorite utility man, Chris Taylor, is probably going to have the other spot. And I know it's a hot topic. I know some fans are wondering why, but the truth is he can do it all. And you look at Outman and you look at Pages, they're only outfielders. So if you don't have Kim on this roster to start the season, you need second baseman. Well, between Edman, Taylor, Kike, Hernandez, they can all play center field and they can all play second base.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, Marin, you brought up the similarities between Outman and Pages, right?
Mm-hmm.
CT3 has kind of fallen into that same thing too with Tommy and Kike, right? And unfortunately, because of that fall off and because of the things that he struggled with, the reality of it is if Dave is going to put somebody in spots, why not put Kike, right? He's got clutch genes. Same thing with Tommy. So, last year, I think really hurt CT3, both, probably in the eyes of management, right? But also the fans. I think people are kind of getting antsy about things. James literally 2 years ago was third place in Rookie of the Year voting, right? And so it'll be interesting. I know this is his last year on his deal, I think. And so he played such a huge role, though, when he came over with Max and all those guys. So yeah, that was a long-winded version of saying definitely was not himself last year, and hopefully we'll see something change.
Now, one thing that Dave Robertson also mentioned about Ha-Seong Kim was getting him some time in center field because his bat hasn't picked up yet, which was everybody's concern. Just because coming over from the international game, it's a little bit different. But what Dave Roberts did talk about was his foot speed and his ability on defense. So if he doesn't, like Marin, what are the odds from what you're hearing or what you know of him actually starting in the minors? Or is that just a talking point right now?
Here's the thing. If you can't hit, like, I that's what hurt CT last year, right? He couldn't hit. He didn't play. And that's the thing that coaches preach from the time you're in Little League, right? The best 9 are going to play. The best 9 hitters are going to play. And I think that will hold true this year. Look, the roster is deep. It is. Like, we can't ignore that. But if you're not hitting, you're not going to play. So if Kim isn't hitting and if he doesn't look like he's catching up, then I think it is a real possibility that he does start in AAA because he's still going to be facing major league quality pitching, and that will give him extra time to adjust.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because the utility depth that we have as well, it's off the charts. When you look at how the roster is constructed, not only do we have crazy depth on pitching, right? Our utility guys are crazy deep. We've not talked about Miggy Rojas, right? Now that Mookie's at short, if Ha-Seong can't catch up, Miggy's probably going to be at second, or CT3, or Edman, or like Dave has got all the toys to play with right now, right? And that's kind of a beautiful thing as Dodger fans, to kind of see those things happening. Marin, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. Speaking of just things that have happened in spring training, have you heard much about, kind of Bobby Miller's recovery and protocol and things like that with him?
Yeah, he went in. First of all, the fact that he got up and walked off under his own power is incredible. Like, he even said, I read an interview that, like, that was the one thing he was always afraid of, was getting hit by a line drive. And then he was like, and it wasn't that bad.
Only
like,
a $1.06 to the dome. It wasn't that bad.
sure, it
Slight
wasn't
work.
that bad. Okay. he did go into concussion protocol, but he says he's feeling fine, and that he's already throwing.
It's crazy.
He talked about part of the reason why he feels like it didn't affect him as much as it could have was primarily where the ball hit him.
Yeah.
Because it hit him, in the front instead of on the temple or anything lower or on the back of his head. So he was saying that was a huge part of why he feels like it did not impact him any worse, because it could have been much, much worse.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen 2 really hard comebackers take down people. It's rough to see that we have. These guys are fighting for last spots. Who I want to kind of get everybody's thoughts. Who would you like to see get that 5th spot in our rotation? What about you, Javen? Who would you like? If you're Dave Roberts and you're putting together that 5th spot, who you slide in?
So we're saying the 4 being the first 4.
Yeah. I mean, you got Snell, Yamamoto, Roki, Shohei.
Well, but I mean, Shohei's not charted for any time soon. So let's say
I get it.
Opening day, trying to think of the 5. So we've got Snell, Yamamoto, Roki, and who are we saying will be the 4th?
Everyone's talking about Dustin May or Gonsolin.
Okay. For me, Dustin May is huge. And obviously Glasnow, right? So it'll be Glasnow. We'll say Glasnow.
How are we not saying Glasnow?
So Glasnow will be the 4. And then that 5 will be a toss-up, right? So I would like it to be Dustin May, because his stuff is so nasty. And just the fact of what he went through, right? To get the reason he wasn't playing wasn't necessarily an athletic injury, but he's talked about he's got to get back into that routine, being used to throwing and all that, and just watching him throw that first inning, getting a strikeout, and how emotional he got. I would love to see the 5 be Dustin May.
Yeah. How about you, Maren?
Yeah, exactly the same thing. I want to see Dustin May. I mean, his stuff is filthy, and it looks better than what it was before, to be honest. And I mean, I know he throws hard, but his breaking stuff is moving all over the place. And I think that when you go through an experience like he did, it brings a new perspective. Mm-hmm. And at this point, he's happy to be alive. It's not just that he's happy to be playing baseball. He's happy to be alive. And I think that will allow him to pitch a little bit more freely than going in thinking, oh my gosh, I have to win this spot. I have to win this job, and I have to keep this job. He's just like, hey, I'm here. I'm alive, and let's go.
Watching and listening to him talk, he hit on that so hard when he was doing some of his post-game and his interviews and everything. It would literally said exactly what he said. I'm glad I'm alive. I'm glad I'm here. He talked about the emotions and how heavy it was. Right. And then getting out of the traffic that he was in that first inning, getting that strikeout, and he was like, it just lifted off. And it felt so light, but he hit really hard on. He's glad he's here. He's happy to be alive. And I think he said he looks at it like a new beginning. And he doesn't care where his velo is at. Obviously he does, but his velo is a little low right now, but he's like, I'm not concerned with that. Right. I'm concerned with throwing strikes, my stuff doing what it's supposed to do, and that I'm just here. So I'm a huge fan, and I want to see him do what he can do.
Yeah. I think he looks a lot stronger. He's been in the system for so long. Right. And so he's one of those homegrown guys, right? We had Jerry on, and Jerry talked a lot about building the foundation.
Interesting you brought that up. There's a reason why players want to play here. If everybody knows that the Dodgers are a big market team, but there's a lot of big market teams, not just in baseball, but all professional sports. Chicago's a huge market. New York's a huge market, right? But there are places where they're not thriving in the baseball world, because they haven't set up their farm system. See, the Dodgers, what they did is they made sure they laid the foundation. They wanted to make sure they had a rock solid farm system. Make sure they drafted extremely well. Make sure that they would develop the guys. And when they got to the big leagues, they either had these guys stay or they use those guys to be traded for guys like a Mookie Betts, right? David Price at the time. So there are teams that are kind of crying, oh, we can't compete with the Dodgers. Yeah, well, you may not have the market that the Dodgers have, but what are you doing with your farm system? Every team that, and I'm not going to pick on certain teams, certain cities.
Let's call these teams out.
I'm not going to call them. I'll do it later. You can call them out. But what are you doing if you're a team that's not, let's say, have the biggest market? You're usually getting the third, fourth, fifth pick, sometimes the first pick in the draft. What are you doing with those picks?
Facts.
That's why you have to develop your farm system and then plug in.
Absolutely.
Because San Diego, they're not the biggest in the market, and they've done a great job of drafting guys, developing guys. Their kid back there, Jackson Rose, with box ball, absolute stud. Okay, so you need to make sure you have a development system. Make sure you draft well, and then you can bring in guys in place. So there is no reason why there are teams that are not as big as the Dodgers should not be at least competing.
For sure.
Because you have plenty of opportunities in the international market. Baseball has more opportunities than any other sport. Football just has college football. Okay. Basketball really just has college. Yes, you got some international. Baseball has a plethora. Dominican, Puerto Rico, China, Japan, Korea, right? To Spain, Mexico. So, and they have college baseball. So baseball is the easiest to go get talents.
Yeah.
But are you developing that talent? So everybody picking the Dodgers. Dodgers have done it right from day one. Foundation, develop, and now that we're ready to win, now we're going to sign a Shohei Ohtani. Now we're going to sign a Freddie Freeman. It's not like Freddie Freeman was on the open market a few years ago. Nobody wanted Freddie Freeman. Nobody wanted him. Dodgers like, okay. So again, it's one of those things that don't pick on the Dodgers for your failings.
Obviously, spring training doesn't count, right? But what are some things that you've seen coming out of spring training that kind of gets you excited looking forward for 2025?
I think honestly for me, it's Mookie Betts back at shortstop. That's a storyline that I'm really following closely. It's not that he did a bad job last year. It's just, it was, he didn't really have time to prepare himself to play shortstop in the majors. So that to me was something that stood out. And then him moving back. I thought Miggy Rowe last year, great. And I was honestly expecting the Dodgers to say, yeah, Miguel Rojas coming back, going to play shortstop. Mookie's going to be in right field. I'm all for it, but we're not just seeing it now with Mookie. We're seeing it kind of across the league where these veterans that are used to playing a certain position are moving. I mean, look at Mike Trout, right? They want to keep him healthy and on the field. They're moving him from center to right. They're doing the same thing with Mookie. They want to keep him on the field, so they're going to put him in the infield. And I think that's something I'm going to follow closely throughout the season to see if this experiment truly works this year and if he stays there the whole time or if the Dodgers end up moving him to second base even or maybe there is something that happens where he does have to go back into the outfield. But I think that's the big thing for me is how is he going to be at short and is he going to quarterback the infield?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of a natural slide in almost giving us that, that Derek Jeter-esque leader at shortstop, right? Mm-hmm. We all know that Mookie's the leader of the team. He's got that mouthpiece that kind of gets everybody going, right? Look at the party that he had the day, the night of the parade, right? Even looking at the speech he gave at the ESPYs, right? Everybody get in line because we got to add some more jewelry, right? So he's that mouthpiece for the team. And I think that slide over to shortstop is such an awesome move because, one, it's about giving him those 7 additional, he's talked about he wants to play 7 more years. Mm-hmm. It gives him that ability to do. and really quarterback really well for us. One of the things that I was thinking about with this spring training is managing expectations as fans, right? And even what Dave has to do, right? Um, have you written or thought a lot about that? Like talk some of the fans off the edge, Marin. Like we're going 162-0, right?
No, we are not. No, honestly, Miguel Rojas, he said they were going to win 120. Like, even that's steep. 120 wins, like, okay. No, they're not going 162-0. And could they win 120? Maybe. Is it realistic? Probably not. Like, the parity in this league is just crazy, unless you're the Marlins and the White Sox. But like, but the Dodgers, at the end of the day, the goal is the postseason. You want to be healthy for the postseason, and you want to be playing for a World Series title. So you have to do what you have to do during the regular season to make sure that you get there. And that might not be winning 120 games, but if you have a comfortable 10-game lead in the NL West, then maybe there is some time for you to rest certain people and make sure that they are healthy when October comes.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge thing that Dave really looks at, right? Managing those assets in a way that gets us set up for October, right? Again, like we were talking, Marin, we'd all love to go 121, right? We'd love to go 162-0. But it's about making sure that we're not rolling into the postseason pitching bullpen games from the DS all the way through the World Series.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's easy for us to think like, oh, we've got like 7 starting pitchers. We're going to be untouchable, right? But Kersh has got injuries. Shohei's coming off injuries. Glass now can be prone to injuries, right? Roki's a rookie. Like, our dogs are Snell and Yamamoto, right? And Dustin May's coming back, Gonzalez, all these things. There's a lot of variables. Dave has to manage that, right? And I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does that.
I have this feeling, and I've been thinking about it kind of all off season, because they have signed 2 pitchers out of Japan now who are used to pitching once a week. And I'm wondering if that's the future of baseball, is and moving away from the 5-man rotation into a 6 or 7-man rotation, because we're seeing so many injuries. It'll alleviate some of that, hopefully, but then it gives you that depth, right? So we're talking about, okay, so they're, maybe once Kershaw comes back, the Dodgers have 6 solid starters. But then you look at the bullpen and your long relievers. Was that Tony Gonsolin? Is that, Landon Knack? Is that Ben Kasparius? Like, what are we looking at out of the bullpen that can, and they still may give a spot start. Like, that's very possible.
That's crazy.
And then you're looking at more of a 7-man rotation. So literally everyone's throwing once a week.
Yeah. The evolution of the game is crazy to see. And ultimately what it boils down to is that push, right? How do we build this team in a way that allows us to push? And what's crazy to me is that you have all these guys that are technically number ones. Glass now, Snell, Yamamoto, Roki eventually. Shohei's kind of that. Of course, we know he's a unicorn, right? But if he decided, hey, pitching's always my favorite, I'm done hitting, he'd be a number one in a rotation, right? But all of these guys are willing to forego those individual stats and individual numbers for the greater good. And I think you'll probably we'll see a lot more guys doing that, especially if we do see more 6 and 7 man rotations going forward, because I mean, Blake Snell chose to come here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He could have gone anywhere else that had money. There are other people after him. I mean, Toronto's after everybody, but they ain't getting nobody.
Yeah, there's
yeah,
something to be said for that. There's something to be said for the culture that the Dodgers have built that attracts these veterans who are, used to being an ace. They're used to being that number one guy. Maybe they're used to being an everyday starter in the field, and they want to win and they want to be a part of what these guys have built in LA, and they're willing to sacrifice that.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, it's crazy, but it's awesome. And, baseball fans hate it if they're not Dodger fans, but it's like everyone has the ability to do this. They just have to be willing to spend the money.
Spend the money, build the culture, make sure everything is lined up. I mean, from top down, right? And that's the great thing. Obviously, we are super excited for the upcoming season. We did a little bit of a prediction in our first episode. Javen, Brandon, and I kind of, threw out what our thoughts are. What do you think we're looking at, Marin, rolling into the season? Where are you going at with our wins? And what do you think we got?
Oh, how many wins we're doing? Okay. Dang. Let's go 114.
Oh, I like it.
Listen, I just played roulette the other day at the casino and 14 was hot. So we're
There you go.
we're going with 114. Yeah. That's my number.
I hope you have fun.
I did.
Let's have you on again.
This ain't no regular thing. I came for the ring, you know what I mean. I shoot my shot and it's clean. This for my city, yeah, this for my team. If you talking, it's out of